Thanks, Jerome, and good to see some familiar faces. I was here, actually both last year and the year prior, and had a chance to speak at the first one, so I appreciate the opportunity to address some of the concerns that hopefully the rest of you share with us landowners and so on. Let's see here. Okay, as far as the presentation, I sent to Jerome and Mark and a couple other people here as to what topics to cover. And I had, a list of about 8 or so, something like that. And they settled on these 3. So I'll try to get over some of these things. And as far as TCD to the landowners, that'll be the first thing. It's kind of a plethora, I guess you could call it, a variety of reactions. The first one, frankly, was mine, and that was basically the title of the presentation at the meeting up in St. Louis when we had our first meeting way back in, I believe that was in 2009. And others are from other landowners that are in the Walnut Council and so on, and people that I know real well. Emotional despair, 40 years of work and dreams down the drain, that could apply to me. The impact to landowners is a significant one. I'll get into some of the values and so on and what that means. This was to be part of the retirement, and I think I would identify in that as well. Our legacy for the next generation has been lost. And you'll get into the understanding of that as we go into how long it takes to get a tree to grow to the point where the timber value for log harvest is worth it. And my kids will inherit a bunch of dead trees. That's a new one from one of the other landowners in Missouri. It takes 60 to 80 years to raise a walnut tree crop. That's probably a lot longer than some of you thought, and it's maybe less than some of the rest of you thought. And a lot of that is, the range even at 60 to 80 is going to be a little bit predicated by how suitable the particular site is for black walnut. If it's a poor site, if you're dead set on getting a 24-inch tree, you might be waiting 100, 150 years. So it can be a slow-growing tree. Good sites, the tree will be growing during the range of, say, from about 8-inch diameter up to at least 20, 22. You're looking at probably a half an inch per year, 1/4 of an inch on each side of the tree. And that's good growth. I've been keeping growth records on my place, and I'll show you some slide on that, so on. Anyway, what I want to relate this to some of you that maybe don't have too much background in walnut and so on, but maybe have other farm background, you can relate to a corn farmer. How would he like to plant and take care of a crop for 60 to 80 years and never harvest? That maybe puts it into perspective of what that means to us landowners with walnut. There was one of the, I forget now who it was Bruce or whoever it was, about federal crop insurance. There is none available for black walnut timber. Where that was out in California with the English walnut. Again, it's an annual crop and so on, just like you'd produce an annual crop of citrus or fruit, apples and grapes and so on. So we do not have that as a fallback. One of our members in Missouri sells federal crop insurance, and she spent a lot of time digging in to try to find out what it would take to get that added. And in these times where the budgets are being cut, forget it. She spent several days and working with the regional office out of Kansas City and trying to figure out what would have to go into it. And it'd take an act of God to get it, so we've given up. TCD is to the walnut grower is like mad cow disease, hoof and mouth disease to a rancher. I mean, it tears you a new one when something like that would hit the ranchers. And frankly, that's what it's doing to us. And I think, the state agencies and so on, how they would be involved in Missouri or whatever, if mad cow disease or hoof and mouth disease or brucellosis or something like that started hitting an area of Missouri. Thousands of Midwest farms have hundreds of walnut trees per farm. This is why it was difficult for my previous speaker here, Tom Rutledge, to answer. It's impossible. Missouri leads, this was on one of Bruce's slides this morning, 42 million walnut trees is the estimated number based on the FIA data. That's over 5 inches in diameter. And probably, the truth be known, there's probably that many trees almost less than 5. Because a lot of them just, where they are volunteering in, they're so thick. There's not room for all of them as adults or maturing tree, if you will. And so they crowd each other out and so on. Anyway, Missouri has 42 million. Ohio comes in second at 18 million. And I just roughed out the histogram as far as the numbers and so on. And Missouri accounts for about 20% of the native range of black walnut. Again, thousands of Midwest farms, not just in Missouri, but eastern Kansas, good share of Iowa. I'm a native of Minnesota, and we had walnut trees on the home farm in southwest Minnesota. But there's just literally hundreds and hundreds of walnut trees on farms. I'll show a couple slides and show how that continues to happen and so on as machinery, farm size, and so on has changed. APHIS has estimated the value of the standing timber of walnut in the native range as $539 billion, over $500 billion. That's just the timber value. That doesn't take into account the urban areas where you got the walnut trees in all of our towns. I mean, it's going to be an ugly sight in a lot of our Midwest towns in the future. With both ash and walnut succumbing, it's going to be ugly. Okay, there's been a couple comments about, trees, what quality and so on, veneer. These two poor trees, they don't have a chance. They'll never see the inside of a mill. The tree on the left, I want to point out, look at the form of that tree. Given a chance on decent soil and so on, walnut tree wants to be a big bush that stands, say, 65, 80, 85 feet tall. And it'll have a crown that'll reach out, say, 35 feet each way. For nut production, as Tom was maybe referring to and showed slides, they got a 40-foot spacing, letting that crown spread out so that you get all of this branch and limb scaffolding and so on to produce the nuts and so on. The tree on the right, you see this point right out here? That was the leader at one time, and I expect what happened is some other tree during a storm, fell on top of it and crushed it down, and then you see what would have been just epicormic sprouts coming out of the trunk, and you ended up with 4 trunks. I wish I'd have measured the size of that. It's, I would say below, in this area in here, I'd say that's probably 24, 26 inch down at the base. But that tree is absolutely, how are you going to fit that on a mill? You can't. You have to be just real short stock stuff. The other tree on the left, I don't know if you can see it or not, but that's probably a bulldozer scar. this is gravel road and the fence and so on. I expect years ago when they were probably bulldozing out the old fence, they scraped it and so on. And it's double trunk, so it's useless. Okay, this shows same site in 1974. There's a few people in this room that have been on this farm. This happens to be mine, the way I bought it 40 years ago. My wife and I were living in St. Louis at the time, and I bought a small piece of land to raise walnut because the word was getting out from the industry and the Forest Service working together that there was not going to be enough walnut to replace and feed the global demand, market demand for walnut in the future. So they advocated planting and managing, taking care of walnut and so on. So Extension Services and Forest Service and everybody along those lines was encouraging and to take care of walnut trees in the Midwest. And so I fell in line, and I've enjoyed it. It's been a big part of my life for 40 years. In contrast, on the right is basically pretty much the same view. In fact, this tree right here is that one over there. This one is actually a sprout from a harvested tree. The land was changed hands a couple times right before I bought this small tract, and the realtors harvested the walnut off. First mistake I made was buying land where the walnuts were just harvested. You got to wait a long time till you get another crop coming off of it. But anyway, when you harvest a tree in an open area like this, you're going to get anywhere from 6 to 15, maybe even more sprouts coming up from that trunk, and it's a little bit dependent on the height of the cut and so on. That was cut down quite flush, and I eventually selected the straightest one and so on, and pruned it up. So a lot of work going into doing this. Anyway, this is a span of 26 years. This is my son Brandon at the ripe age of about 2. And he's showing the height of that little tree there. He stands there with a pacifier and so on, and he's not using a pacifier anymore, as you can see on the right. He's a good-sized guy. Anyway, and it's clean in that particular area, and it's because we hosted the 2008 National Walnut Council tour there, so I don't keep it clean like that. All these trees that you're looking at are uneven-aged volunteers. Going back to that very first photo, and you can even see it kind of behind Brandon there, on that left-hand side, it was a bluegrass pasture. That was before fescue invaded everything. But that was bluegrass pasture, and there were scattered walnut trees around in that pasture. And that's a point I want you to kind of understand, because that's what brings on all these uneven-aged volunteers. Squirrels are good at planting them. They aren't worth a darn at getting them in rows, but they're good at planting them. They, when the nut drop in the fall, there's more nuts than they can eat, so they go and hide and plant them. And they forget where they planted them, but they got all day to smell around trying to find them as they get hungry and so on. But so that's how all that happens. And just a couple more pictures. These are all manually pruned. Again, picture these trees without proper training, where you get a single leader, get as straight of a trunk as possible, because that's what you need for veneer. One of the things I wanted to point out is there's a bigger difference of lumber to veneer than what was mentioned in the paper this morning. Standing value of walnut on the trunk is going to average roughly 50 cents a board foot. That's the standing value. It might vary down to 40 and go up as high as 60, but say 50 cents. Veneer, there's a lot of grades of veneer. I think it's upwards of 8 if I remember right. Jerry, correct me if you understand differently. But anyway, there's 4 faces as you look at a tree and judged. And if all 4 faces are clear of defects, and you got the length and the girth and all those kinds of things, the market for veneer starts off basically at $1.50, $2 a board foot, and go up to 2, 4, 6, 8. I hear of sometimes 10 or double figures, but you're looking at, so instead of 50 cents, you're looking at say $5. That's tenfold. So you're looking at 10 to 20-fold difference in lumber trees versus veneer quality butt logs. That's a huge difference. So there's the incentive for trying to train the growth for clearness and defect-free. Expected value on our property is, I feel real conservatively, if these trees can reach maturity, and it's going to be over a period of time, because they're all right now in different sizes and so on, 400,000 pushing $500,000, and my property is small compared to a lot of Walnut Council members through the whole Midwest. I know several of them real well that they're looking at a couple hundred acres, and they're looking at $2 or $3 million. One of the thoughts or comments yesterday, I think, of their tree removal of ash in Fort Wayne, if I understood right, was it $1.5 million? One farm, the value of the walnut, would it be to just kind of put in perspective for you folks. Okay, aerial view of my place. I georeferenced the walnut trees there. What I want to point out is, oh man, I just did that. There we go. This was the tour trail for the 2008 national tour. We had, I had neighbors with trailers and so on, and busloads of members would come out and get about this far, and we'd bring them on down. The pink ones are where I've kept growth records on, and scattered walnut through the rest of the area. Want to point out there's 2 wet weather creeks that come down, one here and one coming down through here and join together. So this is that kind of that relatively low area in the bench and so on along it. That is really pretty good soil. It's generally speaking, it's better than the somewhat suited. NRCS has done a wonderful job of coming out with, I think it's 6 levels of suitability for walnut. And the other thing I wanted to point out is this hill is dominated by true white oak, Quercus alba, and there's scattered a few walnut in there. And you can see about maybe 5 or so there. The significance of that is this land more than likely has been high graded, and if some of you aren't familiar with that logging term, it's when loggers come in, they take the best species and the best specimens of each of those species if it's not a managed timber sale. And so what you're doing is you're taking the best stuff out and leaving the junk. Well, through those couple of harvests, they've taken out the walnut out of there. So it's truly a forest climaxing into an oak hickory forest. Again, if you just take out occasional trees here and there, fell it, you got a little bit of an opening, a sky, probably 1/10 or 1/4 of this room. That's not enough light getting in for any walnut seedlings if there happen to be any in there. So it's going to more so go to oak and oak hickory or whatever. Okay, my trees are basically past pruning stage, so I'm helping out a lot of other landowners. It's been 24 farms in 8 counties, plus one of the University of Missouri properties up in northwest Missouri, pruning and so on. This is a plantation, 15 years old, it's 16th year now, and so the CRP program is off, so we can go in there and thin. And boy, it needs thinning. And so what I wanted to point out, plantations definitely are a very, 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 very small part of the walnut walnut population across the Midwest or in the native range. Instead of just less than 1%, it's probably less than 1/1000th for all I know. It's relatively insignificant. A lot of trees have been planted, but comparison to the native wild walnut stands, it's still very small. You can see, and the owner came out and worked with me for a day a couple weeks ago, and we started making decisions. We didn't do all of the final thinning, because if you take it out too many at one time, you have a risk of wind throw and so on. Like this tree right here, that was damaged by wind and so on, so obviously it's one of the culls. Again, you can see which tree. This one on the left that's a cull, and the one on the right, and you can see the pole pruner leaning against it. There's two trees there that are probably only about 7 feet apart. They both can't remain there. Ultimately, these trees need to be about, your crop trees in this stand ultimately will be about 30-35 feet. 35-foot spacing, you're looking at 35 trees per acre. And again, one of the slides this morning was saying up to 71. Those trees must have been small. They were small or juvenile trees. Okay, this is a native site, uneven aged along the Avaz Creek. I had 3 University of Missouri foresters out there and told them to go stand beside a walnut tree. And the rest of them are basically have served the purpose as being trainer trees. Hackberry, sycamore you can see in there. There might be a few hickory, maybe swamp white oak and so on in there, but those trees acted as trainers. And those walnut are straight. Their potential for veneer is very, very high. And they were never touched by man until these 3 foresters leaned against them. Here's another site along the same Avaz Creek, a few miles away. These were naturally trained with competition early, and the farmer probably came in there with a bulldozer, and the farmers know the value of walnut. And if they're out there with a bulldozer, they clear the rest of the stuff and leave the walnut, and hopefully they don't scar them up too bad, but these are 2 really, really nice trees. A place that I've spent a lot of time on, it was another site of the 2008 National Walnut Council Tour. 1956, this aerial photo shows there's actually 2 creeks that come together. You got the, you got the Bachelor Creek and another little feeder creek here. Years ago, the farmer tendency was to have livestock along the creeks. They would fence the cattle in the creeks, if you will, and grazing along the rough area, and then the open area was in field. And this farmer bought the land, and he got in the EQIP program. He now he's got all electric fence, and he's rotational pasture. You're grazing the clear area, and there were walnuts trees scattered in there that served as seed trees. Look at 1956 versus 2006, I guess 50 years, and see how it's filled in. The point I want to impress upon you is it's open area that these walnut seedlings, uneven aged, they're in there by the thousands. And they had all the sun that they needed and wanted. And so now it's a high concentration. I also superimposed the NRCS levels of suitability for walnut and so on. And here's just a few of the trees that are growing along the creeks and so on, and just magnificent trees. And again, they weren't touched until somebody leaned a stake. That stake on the right is 8.5 foot. I use that quite a bit to kind of as a reference. This is a site where I did a lot of timber stand improvement years ago. You can see stumps. This is a sycamore that was girdled and killed and so on. The rest of the stuff is below the crown of the walnut trees, and you just go ahead and leave it. There's no real purpose in taking it out necessarily. A little bit of a close-up. Again, the value today, if you will, probably only about $1,200. But in as little as 15 more years at that growth rate that tree is growing, you're looking at $3,000. The highest value walnut tree, Jerry helped me, but wasn't it something like $20,000 or $30,000 somewhere over in Ohio? I mean, it's an example that gets a lot of people excited about planting walnut trees, but not very many trees are going to command that kind of a value. Anyway, the numbers in the white are where I estimated the number of walnut that's given area can end up with crop trees, giving the density that they will need. And very, very conservatively, we're looking at $1 to $2 million potential. It's probably way more than that if these trees have a chance to get that far. Okay, this is a photo I took during what was that, 2009 that we went out to Denver. Colin and Jerry, you were there. And just as far as TCD symptomatic trees. What I wanted to point out is arborists, they're the early detectors that we really need to work with. I think somebody from the Department of Ag in Missouri spoke at one of their conferences, maybe it was Doug Ledoux or whoever, a couple years ago, and that's maybe where the arborist out of Philadelphia picked up on it. And when he went back home and looked at his trees, he thought they were sick and had the Pennsylvania Department of Ag sample them and so on. But the point is, the arborists in these cities, and I feel strongly that the urban areas is where we're going to find it showing its ugly head, because that's where the woodworkers are. On a per square mile, that's their highest density. And they're indirectly, they're spreading the material by buying or bringing home from trips and so on. But anyway, it should raise a red flag when the arborist gets a call that, hey, I've got a walnut tree that doesn't look good. Can you come out and take a look at it? Or it might be to the point that, can you bring it down? It's already dead. When that tree is felled, they've got access to getting at the branches and get the branches looked at by a forester, or there's, you can bag the material, triple bag it and so on, and get it to them for proper examination, diagnostic look at it. They have the access to the crowns. This is a photo from, I can never pronounce his name, the guy out of Oregon State at the St. Louis meeting, Jay Scheidt or something like that. But to me, this photo tells volumes. First of all, this is all from one log, and you can see here I mean, that's the telltale sign, and then also the angle of the cut for felling the tree and so on. But this is what's in demand as a fad. Some of the housewives and gentlemen and so on want tables, dining room tables and that type of thing made, or coffee tables or foyer tables or whatever from this kind of material, because you're never going to get, every one of them is going to be unique, obviously. You can't go into Ashley Furniture or any of these box stores and buy these. And the worry or concern is, you see the attached bark. I also want to point out, on that truck, that word is service. I can't read all this, but you see a tree there? I'll bet this was an arborist. And if this was out in the Willamette Valley of Oregon, I assume that's black walnut rather than claro. I'm not schooled on claro walnut. But anyway, that had walnut or TCD all through all that, more than likely, because this tree, assuming it was taken down, that was just died or was getting real sick. Innocent at the time, people didn't know, but boy, now that we know it. This is another photo, again, showing the bark along the edge. This would be a book match. And if I go back to this one, you see these are consecutive slabs. And you take any one of those pair, be it number 1 and 2 starting from the left, you've opened it up just like a book. That's where they get the name book match. And that's what people go gaga over. And These two planks, that's a sawn edge there, so I can't tell from this, but there's probably not even sapwood. But here you can see sapwood and then the bark. What they'll do is they'll square this up so that these will fit together, obviously square the ends, and they will more than likely take the bark off. Otherwise, you'd have to put a lot of lacquer or something on it to get it stiff enough where it hold. But anyway, so the sapwood's still there. And you say, well, so what? We've gotten rid of the walnut twig beetle and geosmithia. But where does that woodworker throw that stuff? He opens up the back door of his garage or wherever his woodworking shop is, throws it out probably underneath a walnut tree. So that's what scares me. Okay, this is not a love seat, but it's a walnut log seat. And I'm not saying he was a redneck, but they take a lot of beer to make that comfortable in my estimation. And also, you look at, what, in this situation, more than likely what he carved out with his chainsaw and so on. I mean, he did a pretty good job. I've run on the chainsaw an awful lot, the ripping things and so on, but I can tell that wasn't the first day that he had run a chainsaw. But anyway, what happened to that stuff? More than likely in this situation, it stayed on the premises. But again, you're not going to get that type of a thing at Ashley Furniture Store or whatever. This photo I took also on the tour out in Denver. You remember that, Cullen? And the urban forester pointed out is as these trees die in the area and are taken down either by the homeowner or they have an arborist come in, some of them say, hey, leave that big chunk here, I've got a son or a cousin or something in Chicago and I'll take that to him. I can't tell for sure if this is still putting out, if that might be vegetation related to something here, but looking at, the bark is still on. I can see some cracks starting, but it wouldn't surprise me that there's enough moisture in that log to at least finish a given hatch and growth of larvae and pupae and adults coming out of that. Whether it be attractive to new egg deposition, I don't know, but that concerns me. So in final comments, as a walnut grower, I really, really appreciate the efforts in monitoring and outreach. I especially appreciate the biological control research by those that I'm aware of here at University of Tennessee and Jenny Jeswick and so on. And then I advocate efforts that will contain and slow the spread of TCD. It's not moving very fast on its own. That's what I want to get more details on as we learn about this. But whether it's as little as 1 to 2 miles per year or whatever, take a long time to get across a state. So I think that's the end of it, Jerome.